Welcome back to 755 is Real, presented by Topps. Check out Topps Project 70, celebrating 70 years of Topps baseball cards. I'm David O'Brien, Braves writer for The Athletic, and I'm with a special co-host today since Eric is involved in his wife delivering their baby.
Right. He's not having the baby.
He's not having a baby, no.
I love it when people say that. We're having a baby. Well,
he is involved.
One of you is.
She's doing the heavy lifting.
Yeah, exactly.
So we got a special, more than competent co-host here today, and Eno Sarris. Eno, is it Sarris or Sarris? I always mean to ask you. I always probably mispronounce it.
We go with Sarris, but it is Greek, so I think Sarris would make sense too. But we go with
Eno Sarris. And in case anybody of a certain age is wondering out there, Eno is indeed named after Brian Eno. So he had a couple of very cool parents, obviously. I know a lot of our younger listeners are going, who the hell is Brian Eno?
That's right.
He was a left-hander with the A's back in the 60s.
Oh, man. But like a really important person in music, I guess.
Exactly. Google Brian Eno.
Yeah, check him out. He was behind the scenes, more of a producer, but
yeah,
might have created three different musical styles.
Yeah, and also did some of his own some great solo stuff and as a recording artist himself. But he was huge in the development, production, or I should say, of the Talking Heads and people like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's Brian Eno, very influential musician who's still going strong today. So, Let's get to some baseball, man. We got a guy here that can answer a lot of our questions, probably, or a lot of comments that people have made, wondering about things like spin rate and all that. Because Eno does the deep dive, the deepest of deep dives at The Athletic into all this kind of thing. So, let me ask you first of all: the Braves have won 5 out of 6 games, and finally are on that kind of run that they've been talking about going on all year. Or at least they're showing signs of doing it because they've done it against some good competition as well. Mm-hmm. They kept their heads above water coming out of the break. They had a brutal stretch of 18 games. They went 9-9 in that stretch against the Padres, the Rays, the Phillies, the Mets. And now they've won 5 out of 6, and they're at the softest part of their schedule. I know the Phillies also have a soft schedule coming up. I see the Phillies and the Braves running away from the Mets down the stretch. I think the Mets are going to Mets it up. Do you think the Braves have the personnel especially after the additions they made at the break or at the trade deadline to make a run at this thing?
Yeah, it's really tough to look at them as a team just because of Acuna, right? Like it's it's only one player, but it's such a dynamic player at the top of the lineup. Because when you're looking backwards, I think there's a lot of evidence actually that this is the best Braves team. This is the best team in the division.
Yes, when healthy, no question.
Yeah, because for example, just looking at the numbers, like they've scored the most runs in the division, and they have the second best runs allowed in the division. So they have the best run differential, which usually suggests that they're even better than their sort of 500-ish record to date. They should be the ones with 59 wins, basically, right now.
It's a little skewed, though, when you look, because they've had a freaky season as far as they scored 20 runs twice. They've scored 15 runs like 3 other times. I mean, they've piled up some runs.
And that's one of the ways that run differential can be misleading. It's true.
Huge run. Like they had a couple of games where the guys, when they brought in position players and they piled up 7 runs in the last inning, they did one of those against the Phillies. They did one of those against the Mets. So that's a problem with run differential to me. It was okay before all these teams started going to position players like it's a normal thing to pitch position players at the end of routes. That used to be the exception. Now you see it so much, man. I hate it myself, but I understand why teams do it. In this day and age where starters only go 5 or 6 innings, you see it happen a lot more,
What would you say if a team just decided to call it?
I don't think I'd have a problem with that, man.
Yeah, as a writer, I feel like because like sure we get to go home early. Yeah, all right.
Well, it would be a more representative sample of what the team is than it is when the other team scores 7 runs off a shortstop who's in there throwing 58 miles an hour. But
yeah,
it ain't gonna happen. But I wouldn't have a problem with the mercy rule, 10-run mercy rule. I wouldn't. So, and also, while we're on this subject, it pisses me off that MLB finally got a few rules that everyone came around to. And I'm as traditionalist as anybody. But me, like a lot of old diehard people, really ended up liking some rules we didn't think we'd like the runner at second base to start the 10th inning. Maybe you push it back to the 12th inning. But people liked it. The 7-inning doubleheader games. People love it. Players like it. Managers like it. Writers like it. So what does MLB do? It looks like they're going to kill both of those for next year. I mean, what do you think that's more to do with the collective bargaining? It seems like the commissioner is worried about the statistical, the long term, the bigger picture of stats and having 9-inning games and because there's so many doubleheader games now that that's just significantly fewer innings when you play a lot of 7-inning games. I mean, I don't know. And also, I think he listened to people complaining who are paying full price tickets for 7-inning games.
That's I think the one where you don't want to alienate paying customers, especially since attendance is down.
Yeah.
Physical attendance. Baseball is doing pretty well because the TV money is still good. But
yeah.
I guess he doesn't want to put any more pressure on attendance and create this idea that that you might not get your full money's worth. So I guess the 7-inning thing, I could understand that. But one thing that I think that people don't maybe understand so perfectly is that extra inning baseball is not good baseball.
It usually is not. It's play 4 or 5 innings and wait for somebody to make a mistake and hit a home run.
That's it. And you can actually see it in the numbers. Swing rates go up. And because the swing rates go up, because everyone's just swinging for the fences, the pitchers don't really throw it in the zone. So it's like this awful sort of walks and strikeouts thing, which is already what we already think, that we have too many walks and strikeouts. And then let me introduce you to the 19th inning.
I mean, it's countless the number of games I've covered that once you get past the 9th, you go to extra innings. It's like, okay, we're going to be here a while. You never get that. And now it's so different with that runner at second base. The game almost never goes past 10 or 12 innings, it seems like.
I think it adds the urgency. It puts some pressure on the team.
It's exciting. It really is
exciting. Puts the pressure on them to score, to finish the game. And I thought it might be bunt, sacrifice, fly.
Teams can't bunt anymore though.
But I don't actually think that. I think that if you're the first team, right, in the top of the top half, I think there's pressure on you to try and score more than one. Yeah, because you kind of assume they're going to score one, so you don't really want to bunt, sacrifice, fly, get one, and then they go to the bottom half and get one. Then just what was the point of that? So mostly, I've seen teams go for it, like just try to get some hits, try to get some runs together.
I agree. And teams can't bunt, man. I mean, but the Braves, and I don't think they're really that unusual. They work on this at spring training, for a couple of weeks. Then they don't work on it again. And you expect, and then fans are at home watching on TV going, why don't they bunt there? I'm like, because they don't work on it once they get out of spring training. So it's 4 months later, you're facing a guy with those 98-mile-an-hour, sinkers. And you're expecting a hitter to go up there and bunt. Oh, yeah, we worked on this in spring training 4 months ago. It used to be pitchers it was like a given that a pitcher was going to sack bunt a guy over. And that's not even a given anymore. It's like a coin flip.
Yeah, there's this really weird thing, too, this year where, I don't know, this borders on what people don't care about, which is like yapping between two writers about access or whatever.
Hey, wait a minute, man.
But our access now is on the field, right? And you know what happened the minute they gave us access on the field? BP for almost every team is now optional. Yeah. And BP is the only time you might actually do some bunting, because there is that sort of process, right? You take some swings, you try to go left field, try to go to right field, and then I forget, at the beginning of the end, you kind of do some bunting. Yeah. You do
they usually do it at most of them do it at the beginning.
And then you take some swings. But the thing is, those aren't like, I'm now going to try and drag bunt for a hit. Yeah. Because they don't even run. It's just like, here's dink, dink, dink. Yeah. Okay. Now I get to swing away.
And they go in a cage now to do it. They take optional hitting. All the new ballparks have these great indoor cages.
Oh, yeah.
But it's totally different because they're not doing the thing where guys used to work on, like Chipper Jones used to not swing away until like his final round. He's up there. And I saw Justin Turner doing the same thing. He's up there hitting 5 balls to left, 5 balls to center. Justin Turner was doing a thing. It was so cool to watch. He was doing a thing where it was almost like he was catching the ball with the bat and flinging it over the shortstop, flinging it over the second baseman. I mean, he had bat control.
That's
you know,
cool.
the young guys are getting up there just ripping. They're trying to hit the ball out of the ball up on the concourses and stuff.
Yeah.
But guys, the older guys are up there using batting practice for what it should be. Freddie Freeman's the same way. He sits up there, hits the ball, tries to hit line drives over the shortstop, you know, knock the shortstop down. But you take this indoors.
You know, he really told me something interesting about that. So he is aiming for the shortstop, right? In BP. But I was like, dude, why are you aiming at the shortstop? That's an out. Why would you do that? And he told me that his back, I mean, he's had some back issues, right? I think he's had some back issues. Well, he told me that he doesn't bend over as much in BP. And so when he practices hitting it at the shortstop in BP, and then when he bends over more in the game, that turns into over the second baseman or up the middle. So it's like making up for the fact that he's not bending over as much. He's not really doing his full stance when he does that. Anyway, I just thought that was a weird thing.
That's what he's talked about for as long as I've covered this team. Freddie has talked about, or as long as he's been up, Freddie's talked about. That's all he works on, batting practice, trying to hit a line drive. And early in the season when he was struggling, he's like, you're tempted at times because he was hitting so many balls into the shift or hitting so many line drives that were being caught. Just hitting. I mean, if you look at his BABIP and all early on, he was hitting the ball hard, almost as much as ever, but he was hitting 190, you know. He said he almost was tempted to come out of his plan that he's used forever, you know, and just start, you know, launch angle and trying to, you know, but he said, you know what, it's worked for me for so long, I'm going to stick with it. And sure enough, balls started falling in for hits. And now you see him get some cheap ones that early in the year he couldn't even get legit hits. I mean, everything was being caught. He was getting killed by the shift. So he's gotten quite a few hits lately through the left side because they leave it wide open for him. And if he just hits the ball on the ground on the left side, he's got a hit. I mean, and Jock Peterson's the same way. They're like two of the few guys I've seen that'll actually try to beat the shift like that. You know, Brian McCann could do it, but most guys just they hit into the teeth of the shift. They're not going to change what they do.
Yeah, you know, have you had the Giants in town yet, or seen them?
Have they been here?
Well, I just mentioned them because they're doing I think the most unique batting practice that I've seen this year. And what they do is they'll have as many as 3 different locations they throw from. So they'll have three L screens out there, and each of the and then behind one of the L screens will be a pitching machine. So they'll do things where they like the pitching machine throws it hard from close, and then someone throws it soft from back behind the last L screen, or they'll like switch from left to right.
That's interesting.
They're just doing it to like to screw with the hitters, to to sort of mimic different arm slots, and to kind of
makes sense, man.
Off speed. And you know, I was watching it with the Pirates, and they were kind of all being like, what the hell is this? Yeah. And they're like, this is a good recipe for popping up during BP. And right as they said that, the guy that was in the cage like popped up 3 times in the cage. Well, for them, like a lot of people, BP is just about feeling good, but
right, warming up. But aren't they leading the majors in home runs still? Yeah. I mean, they're doing some things right. The Giants, they have been the team, the most surprising team, at least to the positive end. You know, there's been a few negative surprises, but I thought the Giants, I mean, if you're like me, up until like maybe 2 weeks ago, I was still waiting for them to start, you know, coming back to reality. But I've accepted that this is reality. This team is just good, man. I mean, Gossman, I never would have expected that from Gossman. But I mean, offensively, they just do things the right way. They do a lot of things that really are not that attractive in today's game. But they got a good team, man. I would have nobody picked them in that division with the Padres and the Dodgers doing what they did in the offseason. Nobody. Either.
But I think what it is the brilliance. You know, Ken Rosenthal had a piece today about it a little bit, where Farhan is Zaidi, the president there. Yep. I was talking to somebody recently that works for the Giants, and I was saying, man, Farhan must just have like who's the waiver wire guy? You know, Farhan has got some waiver wire AGM that's just all over it, and they're like, no, that's Farhan.
Yeah.
Like he is the guy who's super into the little minutia of like, should I claim this guy and should I claim this guy? And at the beginning, it was like a little bit much out here in San Francisco because they claimed Connor Joe and then let him go after 2 weeks, and they claimed like 3 or 4 people that they just gave him like 2 or 3 weeks and then they were out of there. But that was his process, was to find guys like Yastrzemski, find guys like Solano through this waiver process, because if you find a guy, because he found Muncy, you know.
Yeah.
And if you find a guy like that, it's worth so much money. And it's, if you look at how the Giants are right now,
it's like found money.
Yeah, it's found money, right? And then if you look at why the Giants are good, I think it's because they have no holes kind of thing. Like, when you're like talking about like 7th, 8th, 9th guy in the lineup, you know, they're down 4-0. 7th, 8th, 9th guy in the lineup is coming up in the 8th inning. A lot of times you're like, oh, I just turn this off.
Right.
You know? But with the Giants, it's like if your 7th, 8th, 9th guys are like Solano, La Stella, like they're all like decent bats, you know, like they found a way that like you one of those guys is going to get a hit, one of those guys might get a homer, and then they're back in it. So,
well, I can totally identify with what you're saying, because we see the same thing in Alex Anthopoulos. Those guys were together and with the Dodgers, and you know they've talked so much. They spent so much time together that you see a lot of the same type things from the Dodgers, the Giants, the Braves. And Alex is the same thing. So many times the fans are like, why did you get another catcher? They've literally gone through like every mid-30s catcher, backup catcher this year. They've used 7 catchers. They used 7 before the All-Star break.
I didn't even notice.
7 catchers. They bring in a guy like LaCroix. He played 2 games with the MLB team. They get rid of him. They trade for Votes.
You know, that's right. They got Vote, yeah.
They had Kevin Smith. He's about to get dumped when they bring back Travis d'Arnaud from the DL. But and then at the trade deadline, they get Jock Peterson coming out of the break to fill in for as good as you can for Acuna. Right. He's obviously not going to be Acuna, but he's played really well, playing right field and leading off. So you filled that. So what does he do at the trade deadline? He trades for 3 outfielders, and people are like, 3 outfielders. He got Duvall. Okay, that'll solve a problem. He got Duvall, but he didn't stop there. You know, he got Duvall, he got Soler, and a lot of people looking at Soler's numbers this year and going, really, Soler? Well, Soler was hitting before he left the Royals. Like for the last 10 games before he left them, he's kept that up here. He's raking, man. Yeah. I mean, he's been a great addition, and he's got another year of arbitration. Right. So, and then they got Eddie Rosario, which was like a nothing trade because they got rid of Pablo Sandoval, who's done absolutely nothing for 3 months. So
the whole idea is the same idea, like that's what you're pointing out.
Cover your asses.
Cover your ass. Get the floor up.
Yeah.
Make sure the worst player on your bench, like the worst player in your lineup, worst player on your bench is a good player.
And it's never been more important than now because there's no waiver trades. You know, you can claim a guy that's been DFA'd or trade for a guy that's not on a 40-man roster, but you can't get those good. You used to be able to get a good player in August. I mean, Brace had Derek Lee one year, and he ended up being huge for them down the stretch in the playoffs. You can't do that anymore. So better
if Jock gets hurt or Soler gets hurt, like it's gonna be good to have Eddie Rosario coming back, you know?
Yeah,
like,
exactly. Yeah. Instead of relying on a guy like Drew Waters, who hadn't played at the majors, you know?
They also don't seem to want to do,
No, they're not ready. They're not coming. He's hit a lot better in the last month and cut down on the swings and misses some, but the swings and misses are still so high that they just made a decision early on that we're not going to be able to rely on him this year. You hope, you know, you didn't dump him you didn't get rid of him at the trade deadline. You still have the hope, but you know, they saw enough of Pache earlier in the year that they didn't want to bring Pache back up and have him fall on his face twice in 1 year. You know, he's hitting better too in AAA, but they made the decision that we're not going to be able to rely on either of those guys for the stretch drive in the playoffs. We need to get depth before the trade deadline. So they got it.
Yeah, I guess so. So back to your original question, like I could see,
is this team good enough? Yeah.
I think the Braves are definitely, to me, the Braves are definitely better than the Phillies. The one thing I don't know if I'm 100% with you on the Mets thing, just because they could get healthy. So, you know, they got Carrasco back, they could get Thor back. And
without DeGrom, they're not doing it.
You don't think so?
Not without DeGrom.
Without DeGrom, they're not doing it. Well,
no.
You know, they still think that DeGrom's coming back. And then I also just think that this offense, you know, Lindor will come back at some point, and I think this offense is better than it's been playing. So I could see it coming down to Mets Braves down the line. And I think I'm pretty sure that the second place team won't make the playoffs.
No, yeah, you're right.
So
You got to
unless
win
the
the division.
Padres really fall apart, it's going to be one of those old school races for the division.
The
And
Reds could. The Reds or the Brewers. You know that the Brewers.
I think could.
Yeah. I think the Brewers could win the pennant. They're that good. I really do think they're that good. And I think Craig Counsell is the best manager in baseball. It's my opinion. But the Reds are playing a lot better. And with Votto, where did this come from? I thought Votto was beyond that. I didn't know he was capable of that anymore.
Well, I just love him so much because, the greatest players, I think, will identify a hole or can look at their own numbers or their own production and realize that, here's something I need to do something about. I remember when Mike Trout came up, he was actually, you could pitch him up at the top of the zone. You could get him out, and and people were like, "Oh, he's striking out a quarter of the time. He's not that great." And then he just went to work on it in the offseason, came back and started hitting tanks off of fastballs at the top of the zone, and his strikeout rate, dropped, and we were like, "Oh, this is the best player on the planet." So I see that a little bit in Votto, maybe not to the same extent where he's obviously the best player on the planet, but for him, it was obvious that he was getting older. And he had some choices to make. And for a while, he kind of choked up on the bat and was trying to just make contact with everything in the zone. He's going to be like, I'm going to hit 290 with 18 homers.
And a 450 OBP.
450 OBP. That's just going to be who I am, into my twilight years. Well, that wasn't enough. Eventually, I think to some extent, pitchers start filling out the zone. If they don't fear your power. And so I just think it just wasn't working out that well. So he went to Driveline this past offseason and did a speed bat trainer, over and underweight bats, basically just weightlifting with the bat, and got his bat speed back. And so now you're seeing a guy who can hit 30 homers again. And it's pretty exciting. And it speaks to his sort of dedication.
Where do you put and I don't like to rank players, according to intelligence and all that, but would you say he's one of the more cerebral players you've ever been around?
Yeah,
Joey Votto.
For sure. And he knows about aging curves, and he knows about not only just the overall player aging curve, because he has a shirt where it says decline phase, and it has his age on it. It's has an aging curve. But he also was reading up on the components, which parts of a player's game age the best, and which age the worst. And apparently, your ability to make contact on pitches outside the zone, like Pablo Sandoval style, Josh Hamilton style, that ages really, really poorly. So that starts falling off when you're 26 and just goes in the tank. And that explains to some extent, I think, Josh Hamilton's end of his career was pretty real fall off there. And if you just think about it, I think it to some extent it explained Andrew Jones a little bit, right? He always expanded the zone, especially everyone was yelling at the TV about the slider loan away, right? But
and those swings where he'd go down to one knee.
And that just I think early on in his career he made contact with that pitch, otherwise he wouldn't swing at it, right? And then I guess you just don't have the muscle memory to be to start laying off of it. You're I used to do damage on those pitches, and so I'm going to keep swinging on them. Or you just don't have that.
That's fascinating. That makes sense. Yeah.
So Votto dedicated part of his career to knowing the strike zone better than anybody, because he knew that skill would last really long.
Wow.
And that's why just to bring this back to the Braves again, Acuna this year, I was just amazed. I thought he had that Trout thing, where the one thing you could say about Acuna is he expands the zone too much, swings outside the zone too much. And what did he do? He came back this year and was the #1 improver on swinging pitches outside the zone. Now he has a really well above average rate of swinging outside the zone, and he used to be one of the worst. That was wow, okay, Acuna really cares, and he can look at his game and say, what do I need to do to get to the next level? And he did it.
if anything, he was being criticized for taking some pitches that were too close. But he knows the strike zone that well that if you go back and look at some of the strikes that he was rung up on that he complained about, if you look, they were he was right. And he doesn't quite get that respect yet, maybe because he wasn't in the past. He was a free swinger and that kind of thing. But he's a guy that, you know, is kind of mysterious because we don't get to interview him a lot because of the language barrier, and he just doesn't do a lot of in-depth interviews. But he'd surprise people with his intelligence. That dude's smart, man. He knows what's going on.
Yeah, and from what little I have, when I have talked to him, I think there was a sort of a fatherly, you know, a connection with his father.
Yeah,
where I think his father really taught him a lot about the game because
his
father struggled.
Right.
Saw the game from a different perspective, you know, where
like a lot of managers do that never get out of AA or AAA and become great managers or hitting coaches.
Right. So he learned, I think his father learned a lot about the game in those struggling years in the minors and passed a lot of that on. So yeah, there's some, I think that's why it's unfair sometimes to rank these guys because we don't always get a full picture. We don't get and there's a language barrier. I'm doing my Duolingo, trying to learn my Spanish, but there's sometimes a language barrier and
absolutely.
And then people also just express their
that's what I was going to say. Some people it's clear how intelligent they are with the way they speak, like a Joey Votto.
Right, but then there are other people who know as much about the game, but just don't have the words to express it, or don't talk about it the same way,
or they don't speak. They have an accent. You know, it can be something as elemental as that. Yeah. Chipper Jones, for the longest period, you know, Chipper has his Southern drawl and he speaks slowly, and I think a lot of people would see him in a soundbite on TV and just assume he's some dumb jock. Chipper Jones, without exaggerate, is the smartest baseball player as far as knowing the entire game that I've ever personally covered. I mean, he is a savant with baseball. He can tell you literally the count of almost any big hit he had 10 years ago. He can tell you the pitch sequence, you know?
That's a real underrated baseball thing that, you know, pitchers can tell you what they threw a guy 3-5 years ago. That's crazy to me. I can't remember any of that.
Yeah. And it tells you that those guys were thinking along with pitchers. They just weren't up there, you know, looking for a pitch to hit. They were thinking along with the pitchers. And he knows, there's no doubt in my mind, he won't be a manager because it takes too much time. And he's got so much other going on with his hunting shows.
He made enough money playing.
And he made enough money. That's the problem with so many guys today's game that could be great managers.
You said about Votto too. I was like, I don't know, man. He made so much money. I don't know. He might be like a consultant or something.
Exactly. That's what Chipper is right now, a consultant. Yeah. So he keeps his toe in the water, but where you can't expect these guys who made $200, $300, $400 million to all of a sudden they work twice as much, or they work a lot more hours as a manager or coach than they did as players, and it's year round. And you can't expect them to do that.
Barry was a terrible coach. Barry Bonds was so bad. Yeah, like he'd show up to the park at like noon.
Yeah,
and then people would be like, "What?"
Yeah. So you got
the hitting coach in Miami. They were just like, "That guy's never around. What's going on?"
It's such a different era because you got a guy like Terry Pendleton comes to mind because he was the hitting coach here for quite a while. But they had great careers. But that was back when they didn't make $20 million, you know. So that money they're not wealthy beyond imagination for the rest of their lives. So they actually still want to work, you know. And so TP, man, we get to spring training, get to the ballpark at 7 a.m. Pendleton's been there for an hour working with guys individually in the cage.
That's also his personality, right? I mean, he was
he's a workaholic.
He was lunch pail grinder.
Ron Washington, you know.
Yeah.
It's a guy that scaled the heights. He was a manager on World Series teams and all that. He's out there doing one-on-one drills with infielders, you know, an hour and a half before batting practice.
I think Terry would be the greatest hitting coach because I remember growing up, he had a new stance like every 3 weeks.
Yeah.
He could talk to anybody about their stance because he'd be like, "Oh yeah, I had that once for 4 weeks in August of 1988."
Well, you know, the funny thing is he was a hitting coach here for a long time. And if you go back and look with the year when they changed hitting coaches, the OBP wasn't as stressed back then as it is now, not nearly what it is. And if you go back and look, like the last couple of years he was the hitting coach, they were ranked in the top like 3 in the majors in OBP. Oh, wow. And it was like, we want more, you know. And now if you look at it, it would be like, why did they get rid of that guy? You know, because they've been through a lot of hitting coaches since then. Seitz was really good, knows his shit, but TP was great, man.
It's a really tough job. The average tenure right now of a hitting coach is like a year and a half.
It's terrible.
That's how quickly they fire people. And that's part
Can't fire the hitters.
Yeah, well, you're right. You can't fire the hitters. Also, like but the data and tech is changing every year,
Yeah.
and so that requirement is different.
Yeah.
And also, I just think that too much is asked of a hitting coach.
It's
When they
grueling.
looked at what they actually can do, I think that's a really smart thing you said about Terry. The number one thing that a hitting coach can actually affect when you try to strip away everything, it's really hard to strip away everything because somebody could just have a good year and then say, oh, that was a hitting coach. Yeah, maybe I just had a good year.
Yeah.
But when you try to strip it away, the biggest effect that a hitting coach has is on whether or not to reach at a pitch outside the zone, like whether or not you're going to be more passive and like sort of swing less and maybe take more walks and strike out a little bit more, maybe, or if you're going to be more aggressive. That's like the main toggle that a hitting coach has. So I'm sure there are a lot of good things that a hitting coach should do, but to ask them to sort of take my struggling team and turn around all the hitters is a lot to ask.
And it's so easy to scapegoat a hitting coach, a pitching coach, a bullpen coach. Because what's the knee-jerk reaction when people see a team is struggling, like with runners in scoring position? Fire the hitting coach. Well, wait a minute. The same guys were third in the majors with runners in scoring position a year ago. Did he stop teaching them what he taught them then?
Maybe there's a lot of luck in that stuff.
Exactly, man. Exactly.
And also, if you're thinking about it from a GM perspective, I feel like you have like a list of people you can fire before you get fired.
Yeah.
And there's like you can go through a couple hitting coaches and pitching coaches before then you have to fire the manager. But if you hire another manager after that, you're next.
Yeah. You cannot persuade me otherwise that GMs, a lot of times when you see them make a move after a disappointing season, after they make a move and it's like, okay, they might as well throw a dart at the board because somebody's going to take a fall. It ain't going to be the GM, and if it's a high profile manager, it's not going to be the manager because he's going to say, I managed the guys you gave me. So who's it going to be? It's going to be one of the underlings that's not going to complain about it because he's not going to burn bridges because he wants to get another job.
Right.
And then you could say, I made a move. We tried to address that. All that.
Pitching coach.
Very fungible, like relievers. They're very fungible.
Yeah.
But the rain that you don't see many that do the job for a long time. It's got a guy like Larry Rothschild that's been a pitching coach. He was a pitching coach when I was covering the Marlins.
Exactly sort of what I was thinking of right there, actually.
It's like,
I do think that he might have screwed up a little bit with Sonny Gray. They weren't communicating well with each other.
That's what so much of it is, communication with certain guys.
Yeah, but he's obviously has skills in communication. He's been a pitching coach forever, had a lot of success, So
it's a thankless job. So what I wanted to ask you about spin rate. I know you looked at spin rate, the reduction immediately after, kind of even before the rules went into effect, like that previous week when they said they're going to go into effect, you started seeing some guys go, oh shit, and you saw some differences in. Do you think that the rule has had its intended effects? Because a lot of us noticed offense going up in those first weeks after the rule went in effect, and we also saw a lot of spin rates going down. Do you think it's kind of leveling out now? Guys are adjusting, figuring out how to pitch without sticky stuff if they, after some really difficult first week or two?
Yeah, there's a couple things that I'm saying. So at a sort of peak, or like maybe let's say around the beginning of July, I looked at how many people were down, how many pitchers were down, and it was around 60% were down significantly, what you would call sort of statistically significantly. So 60% of the league was down, and I would say that you probably still have people who are still cheating. So my guess had been my reported guess had been 75%. So I think we were pretty close. 2/3 to 3/4 of the league we're using something. And then there was about a quarter of the league that was down like 300, 400 RPM.
Yeah.
And that was on the sort of spider tack level.
Right.
A reported guess there was about a third. So a third to a quarter were using like the crazy stuff.
Yeah.
So what we noticed was four seam fastballs were most affected by this. And we know that in baseball, it's been going towards like the high four seam with the slider has kind of been, what baseball's been doing recently.
Yeah. Yeah.
that high four seam got less effective. So what we did see was there was actually some trading of four seamers back for sinkers and two seamers. So we've seen enough to say like that's a little bit of a trend where like a little bit of sinkers coming back, a little bit of two seamers coming back. I could tell you right now that whiffs on four seamers is down 10% from before the ban to after the ban. So like definitely had an effect on four seamers. I think that it probably disproportionate to some players, some pitchers, where like some pitchers had a high riding four seamer that depended on more than others, right? So those guys maybe got more affected by it.
Yeah.
But I would love to see like what Wasker does when he comes back, because he was kind of like a high, kind of a riding four seam with that slider. So I want to see, that's the kind of pitcher that could be well affected by this. But another thing I've noticed that I just looked at this for this show. There are 40 pitchers who were down big after the ban who are now back up big.
Really?
Yes. So,
figured where to locate the sticky stuff.
Yeah. So I think about a couple of things when I think about that. First of all, I think that the enforcement is kind of rote and obvious, right?
Yeah, right.
They told
pitchers know where they're going to look. Yeah,
right. So if you put it anywhere other than your glove, your belt, and your hat,
yeah,
it's still cheat right now, right? You can do whatever you want to do. The other thing that I've noticed, and this is more anecdotal, but also they said they would kind of, and I feel bad for Hector Santiago, though I guess he then ended up getting popped for steroids too. But they sort of said that you can't do sunscreen and sweat with the like you can't have it on your glove or something. And they said they were going to really not lock down on that. They haven't really. And so I see a lot of sweaty ass pitchers, like just sweaty hair, like just wet people out there. And so I think that they're just getting the wetness off their hair and combining it with the rosin to just get as much as they can out of the rosin. And so that's they're finding ways that are more legal, I guess, to kind of get some of that back, or some of them have just found a different place to put the spider tag.
That's funny because I think a lot of people
has been a bounce back. Life finds a way, as I said.
Yeah. It's funny that you mentioned that. You explained that the four seam is the most affected because I think a lot of people, the general view was these guys with the huge curveballs are going to, they're screwed. No, that wasn't the case.
There's some command. I think some of those breaking ball command has gone down.
Charlie Morton is a guy that he said the day the rule came out, he goes, I welcome it. I've said since day one, the baseball can't do anything that's going to affect my spin rate. In other words, he was talking bold, like I do not cheat. And what happened? His first two starts after that, I looked at his spin rate was still the same as it ever was, over 3,100 on a lot of his curveballs. You look at a Charlie Morton start, it's fascinating because on the Savant, where they do the spin rate for every pitcher in the game, right? He's usually between 35 and 45 top pitches of all the pitchers in the game. He is every top spin rate. I mean, not even one pitch from another pitcher slips into there.
It's like he's when you do the Aroldis Chapman velocity, and it's like all Aroldis.
When exactly. Velocity. Charlie's like 2,900 to over 3,100 spin rates. That curveball. It's fascinating, man. And the guy's he's an ageless wonder. I've been pleasantly surprised and fascinated watching him. Just so impressive watching this guy go in start after start at age 37. He's still nasty. He's throwing mid to upper 90s with that curveball that is just unhittable.
Yeah,
really. Yeah. He's an impressive guy, man, and really smart guy too.
No, he's one of my favorite interviews.
I like him.
He goes on that smartest list. What's interesting about him too is his emotional intel, or like his he's an emotional guy.
Yep.
And he wants to.
He cares like hell about everybody, man. His teammates.
And he cares about saying the right thing to get expressing himself correctly.
No cliches.
Yeah.
Never an answer just to get the answer and move on, get the interview over. He sits there, thinks about it for a second.
Yeah, thinks about your question, really wants to answer
it. It means a lot to him. We're like, sometimes in post game, we're like, okay, Charlie, it's all right, man. Don't worry. He acts like he cares so much.
Give us the Mad Libs. Just give us the words. So we can
he'll go 4 minutes on an answer and he'll go, I don't know. Did that help? Did that help? Was that what you were looking for? We're like, yeah, that's more than enough, dude. He's great. I mean, he is so God. He's great to have on the team to cover.
Yeah, it was really funny to have Morton and Greinke as like these are two guys I love talking to that couldn't be more different in terms of that emotional quality, but are also just super smart when it comes to pitching. So
so I mean, if he wants to pitch another year, and I don't know why he wouldn't want to. I mean, I know he's got little kids. That'd be the only reason. But the Braves, train 15 minutes so he can live at home in spring training. That helps a lot. But the Rays
also, I think he was really important for this pitching staff.
Oh yeah, huge.
He's also, just in terms of like, so statistically, he's projectable. You kind of know what you're going to get
every start.
It's not it's either he's in there or he's injured. It's not a question of how good he's going to be. And you saw with like the younger Braves starters that like we've seen their best, and now in some cases we're seeing some of their worst. And like, there's that like sort of yo-yoing that happens with a young pitcher, young starting pitcher that doesn't necessarily happen with Charlie Morton. So.
And even Smiley yo-yos. He's had a really great second half. He's been really good after the first 2 months he struggled. He's been really good, but he's not going to give anyone 5. 2 times through the order, you got to get him out that third time through. And Charlie, he might have a bad first inning or bad second inning, but he's going to give you his 6 or 7 innings. He's going to give up between 1 or no runs and 3 or 4 runs, maybe occasional 5, but that's it. Mm-hmm. And he's been a great influence on the young guys too. Just watching him go about his work, that's invaluable with all the young guys they've got. And also, he'll talk to all of them at length. Yeah,
he's super open to like data and tech.
Everything.
And so like that does actually, it is meaningful. There are pitchers like leadership on the Cardinals that are not as open to that. And so that then sort of goes down to the younger players where they're like, I don't care about the Rapsodo, the older guys kind of don't care, so I don't care. But there's a lot of value to be had there when you're trying to shape pitches and trying to be the best pitcher you can be. And to have Charlie in there being still caring about what the drop is on his curveball, or how he can get coaxed more right out of the four seam or whatever it is, and being there from the machines. Yeah, it's definitely That was a really good signing. And just generally, Anthopoulos strikes me as just a very interesting guy. I was looking up the Braves bullpen never ranks in the top 10 when it comes to velocity.
Right.
And when you go spend top dollar for Chapman, Hendricks, Liam Hendricks, Chapman, Kimbrel, when you're signing those guys, you're spending a ton of money and you're doing it to get a high velocity, high strikeout guy. And that makes a lot of sense. That it's been proven, but Anthopoulos would rather spread the risk around by cheaper guys and buy a couple of them. And he seems to kind of value, and this is not something that's valued in relievers usually, command a little bit in his relievers. You think about Melanson, Will Smith, these guys like, the guys that he pays money for don't have the 98, but they have command, and maybe sometimes they'll have multiple pitches. They prove themselves year over year. They're proven commodities.
And he went out and got Rich Rodriguez for that reason. Guy comes in, throws strikes. He loves like Tomlin. He only throws 90, 92 now, but he throws strikes because they watched enough of those young guys throw hard, that bounce around, walk in the yard, and that kills them, and that kills everybody watching.
And those guys are easier to acquire. I mean, you still have Newcomb. Like you can bring Newcomb in if it's good command Newcomb, then like he could be good in the bullpen. You can have guys you have the hard throwers come up through your own system, and you kind of filter through those. But if you're going to sign a guy, then sign a guy that has some command and some ability, because you're giving him some actual money over 2 or 3 years. So I really like what he's done in the bullpen, and I think Morton was a good signing on that front. Smiley, he's volatile, but it's also was a 1-year deal for him too, right?
Yeah, $11 million.
Yeah, so they'll do it again next year. I bet you they don't do Smiley again next year, but maybe they'll give Morton a 1 year, and they'll find somebody else, another veteran pitcher that they give a 1-year deal to, and rinse and repeat, because they've got this great positional core. And that's what he's trying not to do. He's trying not to give up any of the assets that might turn into that core and might add to that core. And that's why I like the deadline, getting Duvall. None of those guys cost a real prospect.
No, they only added about 6 million, and they got rid of none of their top prospects.
I doubt that any prospect they traded away will turn into like a top line player. Maybe like a league average back end type of player.
Yeah.
But they didn't give up like a top 100 prospect or anything. So
he still hasn't, and been here 3 years. He hasn't given up one top prospect.
And it can be frustrating, but they did open the coffers for Ozuna, so like they will pay for certain situations.
And they're about to with Freeman, I think, too. So
I think they'll sign Freeman.
Yes,
I think
it'll get done.
They don't want to give him like they don't want to like $200 and $300 million is a little bit much for a first baseman.
Yeah.
Right. So they
had to wait for their earnings report. It just came out last week. Yeah. They're raking it in again.
It's like the only publicly only public team in baseball, publicly owned team in baseball.
No doubt. And so they have to give the earnings report, and
so we can all know exactly how much money they have.
And they're raking it in over the second quarter last year when they lost money. This time they had an operating profit of like 54 million. Last year they lost,
no
20
excuses.
Million. So now there's no excuses. Now they can give Freeman make him a fair offer. They can't make him an insulting offer. They have to make. He's too important. So
yeah,
they have to make him a fair.
Look what happened in Chicago. They gave Rizzo a bit of an insulting offer. I mean, I think.
Yeah, exactly. You look bad when you do that.
4 and 5 for 70 is a little bit insulting to a guy that like brought you a World Series. It's still a good player. He's not a lumbering first baseman. He still plays good defense,
Yeah, Freddie, they got to do at least what the Goldschmidt got, a little bit more than that. So I think it's got to be 5 years, 6 years, 140, 150 even. I think I bet
it'll be in there. Yeah, but he's not going to be the guy, if you get 200, 300 million, that's like you're in a middle infielder. And you're 25 or something when you get it, and like Tatis type stuff. You don't give that much money, but 100, 125 on the low end, but they'll get something like that.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, I know we're running out of time here. Our producer's got another show to do, and I don't want to keep you. I really appreciate you hopping on with us here. I was going to ask you about Dansby Swanson too, where it's one of those guys. It's hard to judge where he is because there's so many great shortstops in the game today. Where would you, if you off the top of your head, where would you put Dansby Swanson?
It's gonna sound like I'm bagging him, but like middle of the pack.
I understand. Yeah, I understand.
I think he's very good.
Yeah, there's so many good shortstops.
I'd say, you know what, with age, I know that like Fangraphs. I've got Fangraphs open in the meantime. Fangraphs puts him where is it? He
doesn't do great war-wise or defensive-wise, but you watch him play
20th. But
you watch him play, and he's better than that.
Yeah, I think he's over. You have him 20th behind guys like Iglesias, Ahmed Rosario, Brandon Crawford. I would put him ahead of those guys. I would put him ahead of Miguel Rojas.
Oh yeah,
I think I'd put him ahead of Paul DeJong. Even though Ward likes him better. I think I'd put him maybe around 10, 11, 12. Adames, Wander Franco, Tim Anderson. Those guys are supposedly 9, 10, 11. So it's kind of hard to necessarily put him ahead of those. I mean, those guys are really good too.
Yeah. And he does some things, intangibles that don't show up anywhere that, people are going to poo-poo or whatever. But if you watch him, he does some things. He makes some really smart plays. He's a winning player. He played, at Vanderbilt. He was a huge part of their national championship team. But, those are things you don't necessarily pay a lot of money, tons of money for, But this year, the 20 homers already, that's been a revelation. And he still doesn't have nearly high enough average in LVP for a shortstop. But, if you hit 20 bombs and you're playing solid defense, we'll see. It's going to be interesting. He's got one more year arbitration before free agency. So
he's also been a little different from like year to year. Like there were years where he was like more of a batting average guy with less power.
Yeah, when he's playing hurt, he's healthy now. And we're seeing – he's surprising. 20 homers. He's a rangy guy. Doesn't look like at all. Like you see him and you go, how's this guy going to set? He's going to set a shortstop record for home runs with the Braves, all-time franchise record. And you look at him and
he has good plate discipline. I think he should walk more in the future and get that OBP up. But I always thought he had this power. Because the batted ball stats, like the barrels and stuff.
Yeah.
But I like him. I like watching him play, and I think he's a little bit underrated.
All right, that's it. We appreciate it, man. Thank you for jumping on here and plugging in for Eric.
Thanks for having me.
7:55.
Congratulations to Eric.
Yes, 7:55 is real, and we are out.